Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to a very, very special episode of Why So Serious, a nerd podcast. But first and foremost, if you're not already, make sure you're getting onto social media, following us on X, on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. You can catch all of our episodes, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you catch your podcast, you will find Why So Serious. But today we have an extremely special guest in the studio that we're going to be having an amazing chat with. So imagine spending 12 hours a day in one of the busiest emergency rooms in America, literally pulling lives back from the brink and then heading home to step into the mind of Darth Vader. Our guest today is a true Renaissance man of the modern era. By day, he was an ER physician at USC LA County, facing the raw, unfiltered reality of human trauma. By night, and of course during his hard-earned breaks, he was the hand behind some of the most iconic novelizations in cinema history. From the high-stakes medical scenes in E.T., to the definitive novelization of Star Wars Return of the Jedi, not to mention Poltergeist, the Goonies, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, as well as writing on ER, Xena Warrior Princess, and All My Children, for which he was also Emmy nominated. His career has been a masterclass in balancing science with the soul. He's here to chat about his new book with us, which is called My Jedi Memoir, A Double Life, which explores how the chaos of the hospital informed the magic of the movies. Please welcome to the show, Doctor, author, chronicler of the Force, Mr. James Kahn.
Thanks for having me. That sounds like a pretty interesting guy. I'd like to hear that talk.
Yeah. How are you, James? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. Sure. I'm great. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You have had a pretty incredible life, to be fair. There's a lot that we've got to talk about, but first and foremost, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your writing, and then obviously where it's led you to now to really be releasing your memoir.
Yeah, I think I've always been a writer. I remember being like an 8 or 9-year-old kid and reading Superman and Batman comics, and then a little bit later, Amazing Stories and Fantastic Tales and Tales from the Crypt. And I loved all that stuff, all those comics. But often there was a little twist that I thought could have been done better, or I thought of a new ending or a better way to write it. So I would rewrite the whole thing in my little 9-year-old scrawl in my spiral notebooks. And I guess that became my first sort of novelization. And I wrote like that basically for myself for, decades for myself. I never showed it to anyone else. Never occurred to me you could make a living doing that. And then I went on and did the rest of my life. And my tumble into real professional writing happened much later.
And you got your first big break. We were just talking about this before we started recording. Your first big break, which a little bit from what I've heard was a little bit unbeknown to you, but was actually your first article was published in Playboy magazine after one of the judges sent a short story of yours into the magazine and it got published. So what was that like to start off on that journey and to that be a very random place to have your publishing journey?
I know it was quite a surprise. I had always, like I say, always been interested in creative writing, and I took a creative writing course in college, and then I noticed that there was a short story contest in the college I went to, University of Chicago, and so I wrote a short story for it, and did not win. I took second place. I got a nice little piece of paper that said you won second place, and that was all I thought about it. For months. And then months later, I got an envelope in the mail with a $3,000 check in it saying, thank you for contributing your story to Playboy magazine. And I was stunned and called Playboy. And I said, this must be a mistake. What's going on? And it turned out one of the judges had liked my short story quite a bit and thought that it fit in with the Playboy sensibility. And he was friends with the fiction editor at Playboy. So he sent it to him, and the editor said, that's great, we love it. And no one ever bothered notifying me until they sent me the money. So that was pretty outstanding. I thought, great, you can make a living doing this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. And I wrote more short stories and sent them off into the ether to dozens and dozens of magazines, and they were all rejected. So
a $3,000 check to start you off, though, that's a pretty good motivating force to be like, oh, all right, there's money in this one.
It was a stunning turnaround, and then another reversal when I got rejected so many times. So after all those rejections, I thought, okay, well, that was a fluke. I'll move on with the rest of my life. So I went to medical school.
Okay. Yeah.
And tell us a little about that, because you ended up being part of a team that that I think I'm saying this right, designed the sort of the trauma ward a bit, wasn't you? Or the team that designed how things were run in that particular part of the hospital.
Sort of. I went into medicine to be an internist. My father was an internist, and to be like a family doctor. But during the internship in particular, it became clear that was such a horrible grind that I'd be on call for the rest of my life. I'd have to get up in the middle of the night, and I could never leave behind my patients. And I wanted another life as well. And emergency medicine seemed like a great way to do that, because in emergency medicine, you schedule yourself on for however many hours you want to work in the ER, and then you schedule yourself off for however many hours you don't want to work. So you could really create a unique, individualized lifestyle. And it was while I was doing my residency at LA County, we were recruited by UCLA to help them design the UCLA emergency medicine residency. 3 of us were. So we took a year off and designed that, and then finished our residency at UCLA. And then when I went out into the workforce, I was so ready to design emergency rooms that some of us got together and helped design and create the emergency room at St. John's Hospital, which was a little sort of niche hospital in Santa Monica. And it was there that I ultimately got connected to the movie business.
Because you got a call, or your hospital team got a call from Kathleen Kennedy, of all people, didn't you, to start consulting on ET for the treatment and resuscitation of an alien life form, weren't you? And that's how you and your team ended up sort of getting onto ET. And you then were the doctor in the film itself that pronounced ET dead, weren't you? Right.
Well, that was St. John's Hospital that I helped create, was the place where we got this call from some unknown woman at that time saying, someone help us figure out how to resuscitate an alien. So we figured out what was going on, and maybe 3 doctors and several nurses from our ER went down to the set of ET at Laird Studios on the next Monday, and they dressed us all up in hazmat suits and turned us loose. Steven Spielberg just said we should ad-lib it. We should do whatever we ordinarily do to resuscitate someone, because he wanted as realistic a feel as he could get. So a couple of us rewrote some of the actual medical lines that some of the lead characters were saying. And other than that, we just, shouted orders and did our thing, pounding on ET's chest and starting IV lines. And I'm in it. It's hard to see anybody because of the hazmat suits. But when the alarm bell rings, when ET goes flatline and 5 doctors run into the tent, I'm the 5th one holding a clipboard. So if you blink, you'll miss me.
I'll keep an eye out in the next rewatch.
Yes.
But it was during this where you sort of, I suppose, the lack of better words, shooted your shot with Steven Spielberg in terms of giving him your novels to read, and that's after reading them where he asked you to write the novelization for Poltergeist. Is that true?
Right. I had actually written my first original sci-fi novel at that point, which I had done while I was sort of finishing up my residency. As I said, I had taken a year off between leaving LA County and starting at UCLA. So during that year, I wrote this a sci-fi, sort of a fantasy sci-fi novel. It starts out seeming fantasy with minotaurs and centaurs and dragons and the usual fantasy crowd. But then 100 pages or so in, we learned that they were all genetically engineered by scientists of our time. turns into a sort of a post-apocalyptic dystopian sci-fi. Anyway, knowing now that I was going to be going on this set with Spielberg, and I was going to be actually meeting Spielberg, I thought this was the only time I'll ever have to be in contact with Steven Spielberg. So I brought my book with me. It had just been published by Del Rey. So I cornered him after the first day of shooting, steeled myself. It took a lot of chutzpah for me to do this. I thought, well, what's the worst that could happen is he'll say no. But it was still very scary to do it. But I said, Mr. Spielberg, I know this must happen to you all the time. But I wonder if you'd read my book and consider ever making a movie out of it. And he was very gracious and said, well, put it in my pile of things to read and when I get to it. So, we sort of both knew what that meant, I think. But at least I had bragging rights that I had given my book to Steven Spielberg. But then the next day he called me back into his office and said, well, I actually read first chapter of your book and I liked it. And I said, so you want to make a movie of it? And he said, no. But he was behind the 8 ball on the Poltergeist novelization, which had just wrapped. And if I could guarantee that I could finish writing that novelization in a month, I could have the gig. So, So I thought, I thought to myself, first, there's no way I can do that. First of all, I have like a dozen shifts in the ER to work this month, and I've never written a novelization, and it took me a year to write my sci-fi novel. How could I do this in a month? But I said, yeah, I can do it. And so I got all my friends to cover my shifts and just lived in his office from 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 7 days a week, and wrote it.
Wow. And that, of course, had the snowball effect that led to things like the Goonies, Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
So what had the snowball effect?
Yeah. He really liked it. He said it was the best novelization of one of his movies he'd ever read. And I became his sort of go-to novelizer after that for a while. And then, the next fortuitous thing that happened was George was just finishing shooting on Return of the Jedi and called his buddy Steven and said, do you know anyone you can recommend to write the novelization of Return of the Jedi?
Nice.
So Steven gave him my name. And then for an additional piece of coincidence, my sci-fi novel had been published by Del Rey, by the iconic sci-fi editor Judy Lynn Del Rey. And we had become friends during the publishing of my novel. And it turned out that she was also publishing Return of the Jedi, that novelization.
Wow.
So Lucas called her as well and asked her if she had any recommendations. And she gave them my name. So that sealed the deal.
Nice.
I did. I had a couple questions. I know you had some stuff regarding Poltergeist before we get too far away from that there. And I know that's not the main topic that we wanted to talk about, but it's still very interesting. Poltergeist. Oh, and I just went purple. James, apologies.
We don't know why, but we're going.
I went frozen, so I'm gonna keep talking. We're gonna take the camera off for a second here.
I have to say, it's a good color on you.
Thank you very much. They never said that about me here. So, So Poltergeist was one of the first movies that scared the living crap out of me as a kid. It just felt different when I watched it. It just felt creepy. It gave me the chills more than any other movies had. Obviously, there's a lot of backstory about set stories, stuff that happened on set that were a bit eerie, atmosphere, presence, whatever. There was a lot of stuff detected during the filming. I know you had a couple of moments while you were writing the novelization, one with the lightning strike that you wrote into your script, and suddenly on a sunny day, lightning struck. Did you ever go on set, and did you ever experience any kind of similar stuff to what those stories go about on set of Poltergeist?
No. By the time I got involved, that's why they were behind the 8 ball. Is they had already wrapped and edited the movie, and it was already set. The release date was already set, and they still didn't have a novelization. Okay. So all I got to write it basically was a copy of the script and a couple dozen stills from the movie, so I could see how to describe the characters and the beast.
Interesting. Okay.
I was curious how that process goes. Like, what point in the movie do you start writing the novelization? So basically, when it's already wrapped, they give you the script, and so you don't have like early access to anything.
Right. I mean, that was a little bit late in the game. They were still editing when I and maybe they were even still doing pickup shots for the Return of the Jedi. Um, But it was really after the fact for Poltergeist, so I got very little except these still photographs and a late edition script, and because it was while E.T. was shooting, I always had access to Stephen or Frank Marshall, who was producing E.T., to ask them detailed questions about Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
And during the writing of Poltergeist, you were in LA on a sunny day, and as soon as you were writing about, I think it was thunder and lightning, the cloud shifted, and then you saw some thunder and lightning in LA, and that's so in line with a lot of the stories we hear about the creation of Poltergeist. So do you mind diving a little bit into that, or was there any other experiences?
It wasn't quite like that, but it was even more striking. It wasn't a sunny day. It was kind of a cloudy day, but there was no hint of rain either in the weather report, or there had been no rain for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I went in the morning like usual, and around 9 o'clock at night, which was close to my quitting time, I was always pretty exhausted by the end of writing 12 hours a day. It was pitch black, and I was writing this scene that was very tense. And a number of times, you say the movie scared you. A number of times I scared myself while I was writing it. I got so into the writing that I was really into it. I was there, and it was scary. And so I was all alone in the building by nighttime, except for they had also hired, since I didn't use a computer. In fact, there weren't computers then, but I did everything longhand. So they had hired a secretary, and I would give her my longhand pages, and she would transcribe them onto an IBM Selectric typewriter. So she was in another room, so she wouldn't bother me a couple doors away. So just as I had written the words lightning and thunder and lightning struck the sky, literally a moment later, this gigantic lightning bolt and thunderclap simultaneously either hit the building or so close to the building that it almost deafened me.
That is
all the lights in the building went out. Something smashed into the table next to me. There was suddenly this huge deluge of rain, just a pouring rain outside the window. Marcy, the secretary, screamed in the other room and ran in and said, "What's going on?" And all of a sudden the lights went back on. This was a room, Spielberg's conference room, that was just full of old school video games all along the walls. Suddenly all the video games started playing themselves. The crash next to me was the face of an air conditioner on the other side of the room that had blown off the air conditioner and flown across the room and almost hit me.
What the hell?
We didn't know what was going on. We said, let's just get out of here. So
Yeah.
So
My spine is chilled.
we ran out of the building, ran back to our cars. By the time we got to our cars, the rain had completely stopped again and didn't start again. And we left.
That is crazy.
But the final wild postscript to all that is when I was like, I don't know, a few years ago when I was writing my memoirs and going back and researching what happened at that time, I went and looked at the National Weather Service report for that day and time. And it was no rain the entire day,
No.
mild clouds all day. And then at exactly 9 o'clock, suddenly there was like 0.2 of an inch of rain. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees. The rain lasted 15 minutes and then it stopped.
It is so bizarre.
It was so bizarre.
Especially considering all the stuff on set that would happen.
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
going on with the Poltergeist is so weird.
So
It's amazing. I mean, just before we move on to, I know what is the most thing most of us are excited to talk with you about, but that balance between obviously your work life and obviously having to do all this writing when it was thrust upon you, was there ever a point where it came close to you losing your job because of how much time you were spending on the writing, or was it a case of they were very understanding? Like, because you said that obviously your friends covered a lot of shifts for you.
Yeah.
But did your bosses ever go like, you got to pick a side here? Where are you going to sit?
No, there was never anything like that. First of all, at St. John's, I was, if not a boss, I was one of the underbosses. since I was one of the guys who had made the place. And I was good friends with the guy who ran it, and so that was never a problem. He let me work as many shifts or as few as I wanted in clusters or separated or take a few weeks off. So that was not a problem. And that was actually, again, one of the advantages of emergency medicine. In fact, when I first went into the ER residency, emergency medicine was not even a specialty yet. There were only 3 residency programs in the country at that time. And there was a lot of pressure from the AMA to not allow emergency medicine to become a specialty, because the head of the AMA said, it was a famous quote among doctors, emergency medicine is not a specialty, it's a lifestyle. And he wasn't totally wrong, because a lot of the people who went into emergency medicine did it for various reasons, but one of the reasons was so they could have a life doing something else as well as medicine alongside.
Different breed of doctor.
A different breed of doctor. And although the other reason that I was attracted to emergency medicine is it felt like sorcery to me. And I'd always loved, like I said, like Amazing Tales and all these witch and wizard comic books. And the idea of someone being confronted with someone who was dead and bringing them back to life was really attractive.
No.
It's kind of how they look at the Maesters in the Game of Thrones kind of universe, right?
Yeah.
On the sorcerer side.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I laugh. I have no idea what he's talking about. It's fine.
Yeah, Andy, just smile and nod. It's fine.
Maester Aemon, Andy. Come on.
Okay, so I know there is one obviously big thing we all want to chat with you about, which is Return of the Jedi. We're all big Star Wars nerds here, some a little bit more than others, for obvious reasons, but it's just the fact that it's obviously such an amazing thing given the status of Star Wars to have been able to do. So, First and foremost, George Lucas, is he the god we all think he is, or is he just a normal man?
He's actually, it was interesting. When I first met him, I went up to Skywalker Ranch right after I got the job to talk to him about how to write it and what he wanted to see and questions I had about it. And he was a very mild-mannered, kind of introverted and sort of overwhelmed by this phenomenon that he had created. He gave the impression of being someone who was, not that he didn't want to be at this level of stardom, but, he was being thrown questions all the time. People were on the phone to him. Should we do this? Should we do that? What about this? And he felt a little bit beleaguered. And the story I like to tell about that with me personally is, I brought a copy of my science fiction novel with me again. I thought, well, if it worked with Spielberg, maybe it'll work with Lucas. So, I had it tucked into the back of my jeans pocket. And when we were all done talking about Jedi, I pulled it out and I said, again, this must happen to you all the time, but would you consider reading this when you have a little time at some point and maybe making a movie out of it? And he said, oh, sure. Here, come with me. And he brought me into this room. It was like a 20 by 20 foot room. And it was just, there were bookcases on all the walls, just packed with books and scripts. And there was a desk piled high with scripts, and there were piles of manuscripts on the floor. And he said, let's see, that pile are scripts from my agent that I have to read immediately. That pile is from my wife, who tells me those are friends of hers that I have to read. That pile is from friends I went to film school with. Those books over there are my manager's books that he wants to adapt. Why don't you put your book right on this pile over here, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. And and I didn't feel like he was being snide to me. I thought he was just offering me a little window into his life. Welcome to my life.
Polite way to put it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing I found super interesting about your meeting with George Lucas at first is it was at Skinwalker Ranch.
Skywalker.
Skinwalker.
I thought that was a
Skinwalker,
typo
that's
when you texted
Skinwalker's
that.
a different
Dumb
franchise.
Just, it was in my
Horrifying
mind
ranch.
the whole time as Skinwalker Ranch. Good Lord. But
That's
I
where the
was
cows
also-
get mutilated.
Yeah, and you see skinwalkers and aliens and stuff. That's why I had a lot of questions about maybe stories about that. Man, my mind was set on Skinwalker Ranch. Went through a rabbit hole about a month ago with Skinwalker Ranch. I guess I just attached myself to that idea.
And who is
So I
George Lucas really?
Yeah.
Okay, then
Yeah.
then I'll skip to the Star Warsy question. So I did notice that in the original script for Return of the Jedi, Luke was the one that tossed Palpatine down the hatch.
Yeah, that's right.
And did you speak to George on why he changed it to Darth Vader? And I'm wondering, maybe is it because he wanted to have that character moment where he has the full circle come back to the light side of the Force moment?
You know, I tried to get into that discussion with George because as far I wrote the novelization with Luke killing Palpatine, which is what was in the script, and I fully expected that that's what I'd see in the movie. But when it came out, no, that's not what it was.
Wow.
So I went up there. I think it was the 4th of July party at not Skinwalker but Skywalker Ranch, and
Are you sure?
so I was, I cornered George and said, "So what's the deal? In the script that you gave me, Luke kills him, but then he didn't. Was that a trick that you put in everyone's script that you handed out so that if someone leaked something, you'd know who leaked that, right. Or was it, did you change your mind at the last minute? Just like you changed your mind about the title of the movie at the last minute from Revenge of the Jedi to Return of the Jedi, or what?" And he just smiled enigmatically and said, "Well, I knew who was going to kill Palpatine from the beginning."
Yeah, about that Revenge of the Jedi title. So we do see Luke kind of tease the dark side in the beginning with the dark cloak. He uses the Force choke, and that is something he deals with throughout the movie. And I know that the book dives a lot deeper into that. So how important was it to you to show kind of Luke teasing the dark side throughout that movie?
Yeah, both things are important. Seeing Luke's transition closer and closer to the dark side, and then giving hints about what would be Vader's transition to the light side at the very end. So those things are very important in the writing and the sort of the motivation and the psychodynamics of the book. But apparently at the last minute, George felt like he didn't want to attach the notion of revenge to Jedi as a group.
Right.
Not the Jedi way.
Yeah, fair. I mean, obviously, you have to flesh out the novel as you're going through it with the internal thoughts of characters like Luke and Vader.
Right.
So how much of that was your own interpretation versus George's direct input to you?
Yeah, that was all my interpretation. And I had a lot more interpretation. Well, not a lot more, but other things that I had written that were my interpretation that got cut out of the novel. For example, I had a section. I felt like Princess Leia got kind of short shrift, so I gave wrote a backstory area of her life on Alderaan that got cut because to be fair, it wasn't in line with what his idea for what was happening on Alderaan. And there were a few other scenes and character things that I got into a little more in depth that got cut out. But everything that was in there was my interpretation of what was going on in their minds. The one interesting thing, like Leia, the one interesting scene I wrote that also got cut was when Leia was being traumatized by Jabba the Hutt when she was chained to him. And she was sort of ruminating in her mind that, okay, she could stand this because she had been able to tolerate worse. There were a couple of pages of her in her mind going back and remembering her torture by Darth Vader in the beginning of episode 4, when Vader brings in the torture droid and they inject her to try and get the location of the rebel base out of her. And she holds firm, but it was a horrible experience. And I recount that experience. But that was cut, I assume, because, I don't know, I never found out why it was cut. But I imagine because when you realize that Darth Vader is her father, it's kind of creepy to think that a father is torturing his daughter like this.
And that wasn't the plan when they did A New Hope, right? They switched that whole, because Luke and Leia kiss in the first movie, and I don't think George hadn't even knew they were brother and sister yet.
Not yet, yeah.
Empire, they kiss.
Right.
Empire,
and at that point, he wanted to leave it open at that point about who's she going to go with. Is it going to be a love triangle between Luke and Han, and what's going on here?
So I wanted to ask you, just because I saw that bit about Princess Leia's backstory there, and obviously we haven't really gotten Princess. I know there's a novel out there, a couple probably about Princess Leia. The movies didn't dive into her backstory at all. All we knew was Alderaan and Princess, but we had no idea. We got Organa, aspect of that family brought into later adaptions. In the prequels, we found out more. But I was curious, in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that released a few years back, they fleshed out Princess Leia's childhood a little bit more on Alderaan, gave us some clips of Alderaan. I was curious, did that look anything like what you had envisioned when you were kind of putting that storyboard of Princess Leia's childhood on Alderaan? Or did you see that, I guess is a better question.
I did not see that, no. And,
okay, that was
and honestly, at this point, I can't remember how much of what I wrote and how much that I saw in that were the same.
Okay. It'd be interesting. Her childhood on Alderaan, I think that's an interesting. So when I saw that in the memoir there, I thought,
how did she get involved in the rebellion? Yeah.
Right.
Have you been interested in writing another Star Wars book that's not a novelization, maybe a more original story or anything outside of that? Or have you gotten close?
I haven't gotten close. I tried to get to write the first in the reboot. I can't remember which one that was called again.
Force Awakens.
Force Awakens.
Okay.
And they gave that to Alan Dean Foster instead.
Okay. What was your opinion of that last trilogy?
It was a little disappointing, I thought. It wasn't as disappointing as the prequel trilogy, which I found
Oh, really? Okay.
really disappointing.
Okay, not Revenge of the Sith, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, some of them were okay, and the third of the prequels I thought
I'll
was
just
actually.
hide my whole background here. It's fine.
I thought the third of the prequels was pretty good, actually. The first two felt like they were a lot of setup to me, and that he was delving too much. He was so focused on the CGI and the wonder of this world building that he had created that it felt like the story got a little short shift to me. But
Yeah, less character oriented and
less character oriented.
less coherent between the three movies.
What is your favorite film out of all the 11, I guess, Star Wars films?
Finally, I have to say, A New Hope. The very first one, just because it was a blast out of nowhere. It was so new and fresh. I mean, fresh then. It was kind of like Flash Gordon, which is a TV series I used to watch in the 50s. That's what comes out of, I think, the serialized old TV series. But it just. The others were great. There were other great ones. And they were actually better as pieces of movie making or storytelling. But that one had the most, I guess, emotional impact on me.
Agreed. A linear, very character-oriented story, easy to grasp. Empire came in and was great too, but they decided to go amp it up on the action and these stakes and the Hoth.
Yeah.
And it's all great, but I do like A New Hope the best out of the OGs.
Yeah.
So we'll get this out of the way then. What is your current view on the current state of Star Wars? Obviously, the potential of it is still amazing. There's still plenty of stories that could be told. Obviously, some people go up and down in their view of it over the last, you could say, 10, 12 years since Disney took over. But, I mean, I suppose it's fair to ask, you've seen the films, but how much of the recent TV series, because that's all we've had for the last 6-7 years, how much of that have you been watching? But what's your current view of the state of Star Wars?
Yeah. I did like the Force Awakens and the final trilogy more than a lot of people did. There were things I didn't like about it, but overall I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty good storytelling. Of the TV series, I find they've been kind of spotty. I thought some have been great and some have been really not great. I loved The Mandalorian. I thought Andor was unbelievably good. I thought it was like a notch level up beyond any other Star Wars in terms of storytelling. I think it may have been partly because, interestingly, Tony Gilroy has said he's not that big a Star Wars fan, but he's a fan of worldwide revolutions. He studied the Russian Revolution, and he's always wanted to tell a story about how revolutions get started. And the idea that it's all these different people from, a petty crook to a politician to an art dealer, all arrive at it, to someone who's deeply into the intellectual idea of it all. How all these people get woven together until something finally clicks to make it a revolution. That's what's always interested him, and I thought that was what was fascinating about Andor.
Yeah, That's
Also,
cool to know that. I didn't know that.
it was also just so well written, I thought.
That's beautiful.
All
In
right.
terms of, sorry, go ahead, JD.
Okay, sorry, thank you. If you could, or if you had to write one more Star Wars book and you had to pick a known character, which character would you choose to write a book about?
Interesting question. I think Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Okay.
Partly because I'm approaching my own dotage right now, and I feel like, you know, if I'm an older guy, I feel like I've been a mentor to a lot of people, and that mentoring role feels important to me. And I like the notion of the old mage imparting his wisdom of the ages to the next generation.
Okay. Did you read Brotherhood?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Do you read Star Wars books? Have you read a lot of them?
Occasionally, I read. I can't remember the titles of the ones I've read. I read a James Lucerno one.
Yeah, James Luceno has a lot of great ones.
Sean
Not
one.
Plagueis.
No, a Timothy Hahn one. I read.
Timothy Zahn.
Zahn. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, those are my favorite.
Yeah.
Out of some of those, like Thrawn.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite Star Wars books? Any standouts?
No.
Okay.
Nothing that jumps out at me.
Fair. Yeah.
So jumping back to when you were doing the novelization for Return of the Jedi, how was it already wrapped up with filming when you started doing the novelization, or did you have any sit downs with George where you discussed the ongoing script? And did he at all then take any ideas if he was on board to make changes to the ongoing script?
You know, I don't think so, but they were still doing pickup shots. They were editing. They were still going back and doing pickups. And you know, I don't think it took anything from me, but I have one of my script that I had annotated and written my own pieces of dialogue into the margins that I was going to add to the novelization. And one of them in the margins, I had in Vader's death scene, I wrote, "Tell your sister there is good in me," and I don't remember anyone ever giving me that line. It certainly wasn't in the script that I had been given. I never received any calls, so I think I wrote that line. But I was told afterwards by one of the producers, Jonathan Rinsler, that George never read the novelization, so he couldn't have taken that line from me. But so I don't know where to fall on that.
Could have been some connection there, though. But that's a great line. That's one of the most emotional lines in the movie, right there. When Vader says that to Luke, I mean, it hits me every time.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on that scene. I felt like it was the key emotional scene of the story to me.
Absolutely.
To develop a big emotional resolution between Luke and Vader.
Yeah, it's a huge moment. Yeah.
George is clearly lying. He obviously read it. He
read it.
That's how the Force works.
Exactly. Someone picks it up through the Force.
So, obviously, during the 80s, you were tasked with writing the novelizations, as we've already mentioned, for some great films alongside Goonies, Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. You also worked on things like ER, as we said, Xena Warrior Princess, All My Children, which, as I mentioned, you were also you and your team were Emmy nominated for.
Yeah.
Nice. You've done some amazing projects. So can you, it's just, I know it's a basic question, but what were your favorites to do out of these? Was it doing those TV shows that led down to obviously, accolades and adulation, or was it more the novelizations of things that turned out to be life-changing films for so many people?
Well, there are things I loved about each of them for different reasons. The novelizations were, I had already been a novelist, and so it was in my wheelhouse, and it was really exciting getting connected with these big, iconic big ticket movies. It was fun doing that. It was wild getting connected with all these well-known people, and it was a very heady experience, and I had a great time doing it. And it was also really fun adding pieces of myself to the movies that weren't in the movies. I did a lot of that in Poltergeist. Probably half of the Poltergeist novelization was not in the script or the movie. It was just stuff that I brought to it from my own personal experience. Like I had done ESP research in medical school, and so I brought a lot of that research into the novelization.
Yeah. Seeing that part in your book, it made me want to read the Poltergeist novelization a little more, seeing you making those ESP connections and get into the EEG. That was very interesting.
Right. So that was all great. But by the end, I had also wrote Poltergeist 2. By the end, I started feeling like I was getting typecast as a novelizer. And I really wanted to get into the movies. I wanted to write a movie. So I started writing spec screenplays and sending them around to try and get work. And I actually got offered the novelization of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and I had to turn it down because at that point I was a head writer on a TV show by that time called Family Medical Center. I just didn't have the time, but it was also a little bit of a relief to be at that point transitioning into at least television and away from novelizations. So then no one was buying my screenplays, but I was starting to get some interest in television stuff. My agent told me, it takes about 8 years to go from writing a screenplay to seeing it on the screen, if it ever gets there at all. But so if you want to write screenplays, being a screenwriter is a hobby. But if you want a career, you get into television. Because your scripts get made right away and produced. So I started getting TV jobs, and that was exciting for whole different reasons. For one reason, the writer's room was just fantastic. You sort of being locked in a room with other writers talking about writerly things and crafting stories together was just such a great experience, at least when it was great. In rooms where you liked all the people. There were some rooms that weren't so great, but the ones that were great, it was an unequaled experience. And the thing with winning an Emmy nomination was really exciting for a moment, but that wasn't sort of the function of writing on that show.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, just to mention it as well, because you obviously connected to the music world, obviously writing and playing yourself as well for that. So is that something that came obviously after the TV stuff? And is that something that you're still really connected to as part of your career on that side of things?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm connected to it as part of my career, but I'm very deeply into it as part of my soul. I've been since the great folk scare of the 1960s. I've been into folk music and played a guitar with the early folk songs since I was 15 years old. Didn't start really writing music until I had kids, and I started writing lullabies for them. And I thought, oh, these are pretty good. And people who heard them said, God, that's beautiful. You should record some of these. So I started recording them at home, and we started writing more and more. And then when I got to Santa Barbara, I just inadvertently bumped into a small local producer there named David West, who had founded a group called Cache Valley Drifters and fronted for Kate Wolf and a lot of well-known folk musicians. And he had a small studio in Santa Barbara, and he heard one of my things, and he said, God, I'll record your albums. These are great. So starting about maybe a dozen years ago, I started recording Americana albums that I'd written myself. I performed myself. David produced and provided a lot of the backup. And I did that more and more. I never really saw myself as touring with that, which is what you have to do if you want to get your music heard. So I just made the CDs and circulated them on streaming and radio stations, and it felt good. I still do that. I had one that almost broke out. I wrote an album of original sea shanties about 2 years ago about climate change.
Interesting. Okay.
And that felt very analogous to me that we're facing this existential threat around the rising seas, and Irish sailors of old used to have existential threats around the seas, and it just felt like a good analog. So
yeah, I like it.
And so I did a music video of that, and it won some international social change and climate change music awards. So that was
Nice.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah, very cool.
Kind of done it
Well,
all, haven't you?
I was gonna say, yeah. What if you don't? I don't know if you have any off the top of your head. Musical inspirations in the '60s that you were looking at that
Oh
Any
yeah, well
few
initially,
that pop into mind?
sure. Originally, all the big early folk acts like Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston
Okay.
Trio, and then Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes, and up through the '60s was a lot of political folk singers, and then the Byrds and James Taylor and Paul Simon, and through early folk rock, and that's sort of who I imprinted on. And that's kind of the world in which my music lives.
Nice. I like it.
I'm curious where you would like to see Star Wars go in the future. Like we're Old Republic, like we're desperate for Old Republic. Do you have anything like that? Where should we go in the future? Do you want Skywalker era stuff? Do you want
No, actually, I'd like to get away from Skywalker era stuff. It's one of the reasons I really loved Andor is that it's about all the real people on the ground during all this stuff that's happening all around them, and no one in Andor is even aware of who the Skywalkers are, but they're having their own dramas. Some of them insignificant, some of them very significant, and that's a world that really interests me.
And are you familiar with Starfighter coming out here pretty soon?
No, I'm not.
Okay, that I think looks good. Really original story. Ryan Gosling is going to be in there.
Oh, I did see ads for that. Yes.
Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I also really like to see more original storytelling out of that. How about Mandalorian and Grogu the movie? Are you going to be watching that when it comes out?
I am. I loved the first season actually of The Mandalorian more than some of the other ones.
Like JD.
Yeah, I got season 1 as number 1. Season 2 is amazing though, with just more lightsabers and stuff.
Yeah. No, exactly. But the first thing I was struck with, even like the opening scenes of the first episode of 1, and you guys won't know this, but Clint Eastwood's first TV series was a cowboy show called Rawhide, and he was a young, cowpuncher in the Old West. The Mandalorian's voice is so identical to Clint Eastwood's voice. I think they must have done that intentionally. I almost think they did the casting based on who they thought most sounded like Clint Eastwood.
That's funny.
because basically it's a cowboy show. It's a Western TV series.
Yeah.
Well, and the man playing under the suit is grandson of John Wayne, so there's a lot of connections there as far.
Oh,
as
yes, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Brendan Wade's the grandson of John Wayne, and he's the guy under the suit who doesn't really talk, but with the motions, and he's got that Western, pizzazz to him.
Exactly. Swagger. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think they did that. Yeah, I think they were aiming for that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you even think about that first scene of The Mandalorian when it first starts. He's walking into a saloon full of people and he's like whipping the guy and putting him out and stuff. So, a lot of connection there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I like ending that first episode meeting the Yoda species. I thought that was a special, cool little Star Wars nugget. And I want to see more stuff like that.
Right. It's a total surprise.
Yeah.
Right.
So in your book, James, you discuss about the masks that we wear, whether professionally or personally. So when you were treating patients, were you thinking of things as James Kahn, the physician, or was the writer in you always observing the human drama of the waiting room that could then be applied to your writing?
Initially, I was at the beginning of my medical career. I was so involved in the being a doctor with a patient. It was all encompassing and took up all of my consciousness. But I have to say, it wasn't long before I would get home from a long, tough shift in the ER and think, God, those are some amazing stories. I better write some of those down before I forget them. And it became a place where, in the moment, while I was interacting as a doctor, that's all I was doing. But even, half an hour later, I've been thinking this is a great place for gathering material. And I have to say I don't know if most of, but a lot of my writing since then has in some way not necessarily incorporated specific stories from the emergency room, but incorporated the ethos and the sensibilities and the feelings, the human feelings that I got while I was in that role.
what's your favorite thing that you've ever written? You know, whether it be one of the films or one of your own personal novels that you hold in high regard that the world has never got to see in the same light, because obviously the films are so well known. But what's been your personal favorite?
Right. Well, I'd say, without wanting to sound like I'm fawning, Return of the Jedi is one of my favorites. And I have to say, a lot of my novels, I spend a lot of time on the first paragraph of the novel. And the first paragraphs of many of my novels are often my favorite parts of the novel. It was true for Indiana Jones. It was true, I don't know, it's been true for a number of them. So I had a great time with Return of the Jedi. I loved writing Poltergeist. Goonies, I loved writing Goonies. That was another one, the first paragraph I loved. Goonies I wrote right after I had reread Huck Finn, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, because I wanted to write Goonies in the first person. I wanted to write it from Mikey's point of view. And Huck Finn seemed like a good model for that. It was sort of both personal and irreverent, but not ironic. It's just a kid going through this amazing adventure and talking about it in a way like, it starts out, so my name is Mikey Walsh. It's like he's like, you're right there in the room with him and he's telling you this story about this amazing thing that happened to him. So I really enjoyed writing that. I think my favorite novel of all of mine is one of my originals that I wrote about 6 years ago called Matamoros. And that was a novel that I had been working on and off for probably 30 years.
Wow.
And it was stimulated by a friend whose great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was in the Mexican-American War, and told these stories about a town called Matamoros, which is right on the border of the Rio Grande between Brownsville, Texas, and Matamoros, Mexico. And it intrigued me, these stories he told, because in the Civil War it was called the back door of the South. The North had blockaded all the southern ports, and the only thing that was sustaining the South financially was selling cotton to Europe. And the only way they could export their cotton was through a foreign port. So they shipped all their cotton to Brownsville, Texas, and then ferried it across the river to Matamoros, Mexico. And then it was exported from Matamoros out to the rest of the world. So Matamoros always had like 100 tall ships in the harbor waiting to send cotton out to Europe and to smuggle arms into the Confederacy, into Matamoros, to then get ferried across the river to Brownsville and back to the South. So Matamoros was full of northern and southern spies and Texas Rangers and Mexican militias trying to take Texas back, and Indians. And oh yeah, Napoleon had just invaded Mexico, so it was also full of French foreign legionnaires and Austrian cavalry. So it was like Casablanca, this kind of wild town. And that just seemed like such a great setting for a novel to me. So I researched it intensely for a couple years, and it took me a year or two to write. And so anyone wants to read it, that's my favorite novel.
It's beautiful.
So out of everything you've done a ton of stuff, books, TV, what is actually your favorite thing to talk about? Because all of them are such interesting parts
and
of your
different.
life.
And they're very different. It's so like a wide range. Even this book is like almost like nonfiction style story,
The memoir, you mean?
No, the Metamoros.
Oh, Matamoros. Yeah, no, it's like it was a true story, but I feel like I was fictionalizing something.
Right,
that was true. And turning it, when I say it's like Casablanca, I made the hero like an expatriate American running a gambling casino, just like Humphrey Bogart did in Casablanca. So I kept those parallels. I don't know. I go back and forth, and after I write a big novel, I kind of go fallow on writing for about a year. It feels like, I don't have any more writing left in me. And so then I move into music. Then I get all involved in writing songs, and each of my a number of my albums have been like concept albums, like one called Man Walks Into a Bar. Each song is about one of the people in this bar on this given night and all their stories and how their stories intermingle until they come to this big climax at the end. And then I wrote a Matamoros album of songs, each song about one of the characters in the novel.
Wow.
And each piece of music in the musical genre of who that character is. So there's an Irish immigrant, I write a piece of Irish music about that. And there's a Cuban revolutionary, I write a Cuban music about that. So
Wow.
so I like integrating the music with the novels as well.
Tolkien. I noticed with your first few books, you said it took a year or two to write those.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go Return of the Jedi and they say you have a month.
Right.
That sounds grueling. Like,
It
because the creative flow of writing, I think it would be so tampered by deadlines. So professional writers, I have so much respect for because they just dish it out anyway.
But that's interesting that you say the deadlines is so, it can be detrimental to the creative force. But actually what I found out in television, which is the most grueling deadline situation where, you have basically the week and the 2 weekends bookending it to write a whole script, that you end up with something that you don't love all of, but because you had to do it so fast, you sometimes found shortcuts that were actually much better than anything you would have thought of if you weren't under the gun like that.
Okay.
So it's both things.
Because you have pressure yielding progress.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with the novel is writing a novel from scratch is you have to completely make it up out of your head, from the concept to where does it start and where does it end and how does it get there and who are the characters and what are the characters about. With the novelization, kind of the skeleton of that is all plopped into your lap. So you don't have to spend all that development time. You can just get down to writing. And the screenplay is basically just like a plot skeleton. And usually what I would do is I would do a first draft of the novelization in about 2 weeks, just writing more or less what was in the screenplay as a skeleton plot, and then show that to the powers that be and say, how do you like it so far? And if they said, yeah, that's great, ask if they had any notes, and then I would go back and rewrite. And on the rewrite is when I would backfill all the internal monologues, the character developments, the additions to the plot twists, things like that.
Okay. Regarding the deadline thing there, like you said, it's kind of put your feet to the flames there. I've noticed, maybe crunch time does deliver a little bit better of a result, because as we've seen with a lot of our favorite shows, a lot of times they've had 2 to 3 years to write this final season. And a lot of the times it's been a very disappointing season and a disappointing story. So there may be something to that. I can understand.
Exactly. And part of that is also because, you finish something and then you go back and you think, well, maybe that's not quite right. So you rewrite it. And then someone else sees it and says, well, I like this part, but not this part. So you write it again. So by the end, it's gone through a dozen rewrites that do nothing but diffuse the forward direction. And
you've bastardized that original story.
Yeah.
It's that idea.
That's interesting.
So I guess we got to get George Martin to get a deadline on his Winds of Winter.
Good Lord.
Give that guy a 30-day period or else it's not happening.
That's also, I think, a problem with people who reach the pinnacle of success at some point, is they're under so much pressure to do the next thing and to have the next thing match what was so great about the first thing. And it's paralyzing to some people.
It's not the raw organic creativity that they wrote their first book with. That's why all albums, like people's albums, their best ones are the first 1, 2, 3, and then they you kind of complacent and you start thinking about opinions and all this, a lot of different factors. But
yeah.
Guys, do we have any more questions for James we'd like to probe and answer from?
I mean, at the end, I just want to hear the single craziest ER story, shock value, just wild. that's what I want to end with. So,
well, the craziest ones are not for prime time.
Fair.
But The best one. And do you have 3 or 4 more minutes?
100%.
Go for it. Go for it.
And I tell this story in my memoir as well. We were in the ER at LA County, and paramedics rolled in 3 gurneys almost simultaneously, and one with patient was unconscious, and the two that were semi-conscious. And the story we eventually got from the person who was waking up and from the paramedic is paramedics were called to an apartment, a second floor apartment. Woman called because she was having lunch with her husband, and he clutched his chest and collapsed on the floor unconscious. So she called the paramedics. They got there. She had to run downstairs to open the foyer door for them. They ran back upstairs. They started putting the leads on his chest. They were going to start an IV, and they realized each paramedic thought the other one had brought their bag full of paraphernalia. So one of them stayed there with a patient while the other one ran back downstairs with the wife to get the bag to get the IV needles. The one who stayed with the patient had the tags on and saw that he was in ventricular fibrillation, so shocked him, but didn't realize that his knee was touching the patient on the floor, and so he shocked himself as well. So he passed out. So now the woman downstairs leaves the downstairs door propped open for the paramedic. She runs back up, sees them both collapsed on the floor, and she faints. So now, so now the other paramedic runs back up, sees all 3 unconscious, and thinks it must be a gas leak causing the whole thing. So he calls it in as a gas leak and asks for more paramedics. He drags them out while the other paramedics are coming in. We get them now and find out this story. Realize it's not a gas leak, but by that time the city had been called. They had cut off the gas to the entire building.
Oh my God.
And now people from that building were all coming into the emergency room complaining of dizziness and headache, and sure they had been inhaling gas. So now there are 20 additional people complaining. But the paramedic who had shocked himself woke up. He was fine. He just and the guy that he had shocked woke up because he had shocked his heart back into normal sinus rhythm. So everyone was fine.
Wow. Pure chaos with no fatalities. That's great.
So that's my happy ending story from the ER. Which they are not always.
One of the stories that stood out was the guy on PCP who stood up, still chained to the bed, and walked out that thing. But then I was wondering, why did the cops bring that guy to you if he was such a dangerous, like he was in a very dangerous state of mind? Or you think you arrest that guy?
They handcuffed him, but you always have to bring them into the ER first to medically clear them. Otherwise, they take them right to jail. Maybe they have
they die,
bleed in their brain, and they die, and then.
It's just like Bane just pumped himself full of venom, and the cops are like, "Here, take this guy, fix him, and then take him after you're done with him."
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Let's end on one Star Wars note then, James. Who's your favorite Star Wars character?
I guess I'd have to say Han Solo. He's just, the emblem of the all-time rogue. I'm just in it for myself, and then he has a turn of. It's cliche, I know, but it endears me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cliche.
Yeah.
What about Indiana Jones? Is he come close to Han Solo for you?
I loved Indiana Jones. Partly I loved him because he's an academic initially, and I was an academic initially, and we both went off jumping into our own beloved adventures.
Right.
So I really related to that about him.
Well, then now I got to know, how did you feel in The Force Awakens when Harrison Ford was brought back as Han Solo, and then a year or two later we get a recast for, in my opinion, an unnecessary origin for the character Han Solo? And I still even liked the movie. I'm just saying, didn't that feel weird to bring back Harrison Ford and then recast?
Yeah, it felt weird to me. That's one of the things I did not love about that.
Yeah.
James, thank you so much for joining us today to chat about your book, which is entitled My Jedi Memoir, A Double Life. Get out there, people. Get this book. Give it a read. James has had an incredible life, and he had so much good stuff to chat about in his memoirs. You can get it everywhere you can find books. You can jump online and find it. You've got no excuse, people, for getting out there and getting James's book. Absolutely no excuse whatsoever.
I also just started a Substack everyone should subscribe to.
There you go.
Beautiful.
which is
Great.
some excerpts from the book, some of them rewritten a little bit, and then a lot of new material, because as soon as I had released the book, I suddenly remembered all these stories I should have put in the book that I forgot. So those are going into the Substack now.
Is that the Jedi Medic? Is that the name of the
Yes.
Substack there for people who want to
Jedi
find it?
Medic.
Okay.
That's
Jedi
it. Thank you.
Medic.
Beautiful. Do you have any other social media at all that everyone can catch you on?
Yeah. The one I'd like people to look at is on YouTube, James Kahn Entertainments. But I also have a website at that James Kahn, and a Twitter X, and an Instagram, and a TikTok, and I'm just getting the TikTok started.
Nice.
Well, there will be links to all of that in the description for this episode. So everybody, make sure you're getting in there, giving James a follow, getting his book. As I said, none of you got any excuse. You can always Google where to find it, or just jump on Amazon and grab it. So make sure you are doing that.
It's also, sorry, Andy, on Kindle Unlimited, you guys. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you could have access to it and check it out.
Right. Thank you.
I think I covered that in the "you can get it everywhere" section, but thanks, JD.
Well, let's be specific.
Kindle Unlimited is included in everywhere.
yes, yeah. Everywhere's the wild. It's all good. Don't worry. But it was an incredible read, James. It really was. So I'm genuinely encouraged everyone to get out there and read this, because what an incredible conversation we've had today with James. It's not often you get to meet someone that's had that kind of life, but has had that kind of influence on the writing world and got to do so many great things. So James, from all of us here, we are so grateful that you've been able to come on the show today, but it's also a powerful reminder for everyone that we don't have to just choose one path. Whether you're navigating life and death of the LA emergency room, or the high stakes politics of the writers' room. James,
Right, and also like to mention, I almost didn't approach Spielberg with my novel because I was so scared to do that, but I finally thought, this is the only chance I'm ever going to have to do this. And the worst that can happen is I'll feel embarrassed when he shuts me down. So I want to encourage everyone, if you're ever in situations like that, as afraid or embarrassed or diminished as you feel about that, go ahead and do it.
Miss all the shots you don't take, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much, James. As always, everyone, thank you for tuning in.
This was awesome.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Keep dreaming, because you never know what's going to come of it. Shoot your shot. And may the force be with you. We'll see you next time on Why So Serious, a Nerd Podcast.